So I guess tell me a little bit about how you first got involved with NIL, just in this space, I guess, so to speak.
So my kids are athletes in high school. They're not getting 8 million, sorry. So but they're athletes, and it was basically their friends who were coming to me, friends at their school, friends at other schools who knew I was a lawyer. A lot of these, a big theme I have is a lot of these kids who are signing these deals, they don't have the money or the contacts to know lawyers. So I became a kind of a default guy around the area.
So when do you say that started really? You started like
Last
hammering out?
summer,
Yeah.
early summer last
Okay.
year. Yeah.
Um, so when this deal came about, how long have you guys been working on this one, the $8 million one?
In various forms for the last couple of weeks.
Okay. And I know, I mean, there's a lot of rumors out there about who it is, and I think I know, but having 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 said all that, it's just you know, there's thoughts about is this good, is it bad for the future of sport and all that, which I mean, that's all philosophical and people could debate that for the next 5, 10 years. But were you surprised when you were working on this that you started hearing those type of dollar figures?
Yeah, this one, yeah, definitely surprised. The dollar, I don't think anybody's ever done one this big, but the dollar figures were certainly surprising, I think, to anybody.
Yeah. When when it started becoming, I guess, kind of real, and you start working
Yeah,
at the terms, the contract, and everything, because I know some of these, I think it was even mentioned in the athletic story, but in the past, I've talked to people, and a lot of contracts are like this too. You sign with an agent out of college. Sometimes they'll go like, "Okay, I'm gonna
yeah,
give you this money up front, but in 3 years or 4 years or whatever, you owe me 10% of this or that.
yeah,
Your own salary, or I mean, whatever."
right.
But a lot of these kids, they might get offered these type of things, and they're thinking, "Oh, well, I'll be a professional athlete. I'll be able to handle that in 4 or 5 years." Is there some, like, just as far as you personally, when you work with this, and this is early yet, but you have to kind of navigate them through that as well to kind of almost not say parent them, but they provide needing more guidance than say maybe someone who's in the pro ranks.
Yeah, it's like 90% of my efforts dealing with the family who see big numbers in front of them, but are not focused on the fine print, which is where the devil is in the details. So that's 90% of my time, spending time with the families to make sure they understand the ramifications of everything that they're signing for their son, and make sure that they understand that you can push back on these things.
And I know this deal that you've worked out, it's not tied contractually to the player needing to pick a certain school or go to a certain school. Was
Right.
there any difficulty in working out this deal when that was discussed?
No, because the people on the other side were tremendously reasonable. So
Okay.
we were able to get that worked out.
Is it fair to say that the collective though is, I mean, it's tied to a school. I mean, not officially, but it's got a pretty strong booster or fan base of one school.
Yeah, I've never seen a collective that wasn't
Yeah.
affiliated in some respects with a university. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's so interesting to people, especially nowadays with the transfer portal being as active as it is, and we deal with that every day at 24/7 Sports. It's just, the question is what if the kid a year into his deal there, so to speak, he says, "I'm leaving. I'm getting the transfer portal." Is there any with this contract in particular? Is there any way for that collective to get out of it or anything? Any penalty?
No, this is a I'm very clear with all my clients. We cannot have a quid pro quo or inducement or anything like that. So there's got to be, as I said in the article, there's got to be a level of trust between all the parties and everybody's expectations, what those expectations are up front. But I don't believe it's appropriate to say, we're going to give you this money, but you have to stay at XYZ University. So that's not whatever the problem is that I think people are not understanding is that could hurt your eligibility to play college football. So we don't want to monkey with that, and we stay away from that.
Is there, I mean, obviously there's got to be some contingencies or in that contract or requirements for him to do. What are those right now?
Well, without getting too deep into it, the contingencies are that he's at an NCAA institution and that he is on the team. That's it.
Well, as far as I guess also like what is he required in the contract to do? Like a certain amount of appearances or autograph signings or,
Yeah,
is it
yeah.
just
So
NIL rights overall?
yeah, so the basic rights and obligations between each party, they're kind of mirror image on this. So for instance, in every one of my contracts, the athlete has to present utmost character and integrity, right? Nobody wants to buy an NIL likeness or pay for that if the person's not of high caliber character. At the same time, we want the other side to use the athlete's image in a wholesome manner. So we don't want them, advertising strip clubs or anything crazy like that, putting their name on that. So there's a trust there, and those are factors. But generally, the athlete is going to tie their social media to the purchaser of the NIL and do a certain number of appearances. I'm very big on making sure it doesn't conflict with school obligations or athletic obligations. It's not like 24/7. You have to be available, but a reasonable number of appearances, endorsements, etc.
Some people will say, I mean, they say it about anything when it deals with student athletes that these kids are getting taken advantage of, even though they're getting paid or whatever. Um, what do you say to that? Because I think there's always that interest in this because when you're dealing with someone who's legitimately, I mean, a high school kid, it's a
Yeah,
kid. We wonder.
yeah. Well, I have seen kids get taken advantage of already. That's the truth, and I've seen their contracts, and they didn't have a lawyer look at it, and they just had dollar signs, and they signed a bad contract, and that is my number one concern. I don't represent the collectives; I represent the athletes. And my job is to ensure, number one, eligibility, that they're not going to lose their eligibility through the deal. And number two, that they have options, that they're not going to become an indentured servant to someone. Just don't want to see that happening. And I have seen it happen. So, NIL deals that are put out there, just like you talked about earlier, here's this money, but if this doesn't happen and this doesn't happen, you have to pay us back plus 10%, things like that. Well, that's no clawbacks ever. No, that's out of the picture when I talk to the other side.
How many athletes have you represented so far, or
25 to 30.
25 to 30? Are
Yeah.
they all California kids in the
No,
state of California?
all over the place. All
Okay.
over. Yeah.
Okay.
All over.
What's the feedback been like since this came to light, on Friday?
Well, I think a lot of it has been shock and surprise. And then I got about 40 calls, people asking me who it was and asking for copies of the contract, lots of that, which the obvious answer, no.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are shocked and surprised at the sheer number here. That's the big thing.
Where do you see? I mean, we live in a world of hypotheticals and trying to figure out what the future is going to look like. But what do you think this is all going to look like in a year, just overall with the NIL? It's pretty
Yeah,
unregulated right now.
right. I think you're going to see some blow up of this. I think you're going to see some massive problems come out of it with some of these contracts, especially in light of the transfer portal and everything else going on there. And I think that there's going to be a call for regulation here. And the problem, as I see it, is there's tremendously unequal bargaining power. I shouldn't say bargaining power. It's capacity to contract here. You have collectives with the greatest lawyers, with all kinds of savvy people, and then you can have a kid in high school or a kid who's a freshman in college. And many of these kids, I will tell you, are very, very economically disadvantaged that I have dealt with. And they just don't know, they're not savvy. They'll never be as savvy as those lawyers for the collectives. So there's imbalance here that needs to be fixed somehow.
So, like for example, in this $8 million deal, and you're dealing with the collective themselves, and how many attorneys are you dealing with on their side, and how much back and forth is there?
Well, typically I'm dealing with one or two attorneys on the other side, and we exchange drafts and go back and forth depending on how close we are, how reasonable the other side is. Yeah.
Did
It can
this
be a
work
week
out?
long. What's
Yeah,
that?
I was just going to say, did this work out pretty smoothly for you, or?
Yeah. Very smooth. This one was very smooth deal, for
Okay.
sure.
So is there any like details you can provide just as far as like the structure of the contract, like what the payouts like, whether it's month by month or year by year, what type of tiers are
Yeah,
involved?
it's a monthly payment, and it's going to extend for a term of years. And it'll be while the athlete is pre-pro days, before signing a pro agreement or anything like that. But it certainly covers the athlete's time while he's in college,
Is
that
there any
entire time.
yeah, is there any lump sum payment, up front when they first get in school or anything like that?
Not really. Most of the time, there isn't in the contracts that I structure. It's typically just we start at monthly payments. Yeah.
I know people they see that $8 million figure and their minds explode in a lot of ways, but are there opportunities for that to actually be lower depending on the wording of the contract or
Not really. No, we're locked in, and the athlete, my client, is very happy about that, and my understanding the other side is very happy too. Yeah.
do you think we'll see more deals as high as 8 million or somewhere in that ballpark popping
I
up across the country?
absolutely do. I absolutely believe we'll see it. I believe it's just going to keep going up for sure.
So you think there'll be one more than 8 million at some point soon?
Uh, I think without a doubt. I
Are
think you
you
can bet
working
on
on
that.
one?
What's that?
So are you working on one
not
right now? Is
not
that why you're
today.
shaking your head? Yeah.
Not today, but I do know that there will be deals, and there will be larger deals in this. We're so early in this process. I mean, think about it, Brandon. We're like still in our infancy here, right?
Yeah.
We haven't reached adolescence yet in our NIL lifetime.
Do you, we always talk about bubbles and everything like that, like even coaching contracts, they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And as you said, we're in the early days here yet, um, and people are throwing money around. Is this like sustainable? Can people be doing? Can you think these collectives will be doing this 5 years from now, throwing around this much money?
Well, the question is there the money behind it? And it appears to me, at least, that these collectives are extremely well funded by an alumni network that previously could not make these types of financial contributions to affect their teams, and now they can. So the thing is, if we say to ourselves that will be sustained, that generous alumni will always be there for this cause, then this is just going to go up and up and up.
Do you think you get the sense that some of these boosters that are involved with these collectives, they almost see themselves now as the new version of a general manager, in pro sports, but now with college?
Well, that's the funny thing is I'm going to plead zero information on that because
Yeah.
I don't deal with the boosters. I deal with whoever's managing the collective and their council. That's who I deal with. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me think. Let me see. Think of anything else I might have here. So there's
The
just so
biggest
much.
point, if I
Yeah, I was
could
just
make
gonna say
one
there's so
huge
much.
point,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Go
one
ahead.
huge point is the message needs to go out to these athletes that they have. This is not a take it or leave it deal that's handed to them. They have to read it, understand it, and they have to make sure that they're pushing back on terms that they find objectionable.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Have you heard or actually seen like any like firsthand accounts of players getting taken advantage of and now they're locked in and they can't do anything about it really, or
Yeah,
is
what
there
I've
any?
seen lately, because we're still in our infancy, is they're not getting paid on
Yeah.
some of the early deals. So then there's no attorney's fees provision for them to go after them. And then the problem is they have that name, image, and likeness of that kid, and they're still using it, but they're not paying for it. Those types of things. And it was a handshake deal, or it was on a cocktail napkin, and there's basically no remedy at law for us to get our money or get our name, image, and likeness back. So that's kind of the early deals, how they're falling apart. It remains to be seen where we're going to go with these big collective deals that are out there.
Yeah. This
What the
$8 million
problems.
contract is it, the collective, do they have exclusive NIL rights to the player, or are they able to, do supplemental deals elsewhere?
They can do supplemental deals elsewhere. Yeah.
Okay.